If you know me at all, you'll know I'm not the biggest fan of the Commander format. I'm sorry, I know, but a lot of the reasons are self-inflicted. My love for stacks decks, being the one to deal damage at the table first, and the fact that I hate that Braid's Cabal minion is a banned card in Commander. There's also the fact that decks can be extremely expensive, and this is coming from someone who plays competitive RC formats like Modern and Pioneer, where decks are already pretty pricey. However, when I do want to sit down and play with my friend group more casually sometimes, I don't always want to drop hundreds of dollars on another deck to play with them. There's also been a combination of me moving across the country and this little thing called COVID that made it difficult to play anything except for Arena for a very long time with my friends. So that's when one of them back on the East Coast introduced me to a format he'd been playing for a little while that puts a spin on the Commander format, Five Below. What is Five Below, you ask? Well, it's fairly similar to Commander, and it even keeps the same ban list as the main format, but there's one main rule added. Every card in the deck, including the Commander, needs to be $5 or below. How you set this rule up is up to you and your playgroup. Do you do $5 US, €5, whatever your call is, it's up to you and your friend group. If you use a similar site for building lists, you could also go by prices on there, like Archidekt or EDHREC, and just go with what the prices are listed underneath the cards as you're building the deck. Makes things pretty simple. My friend group specifically defines it as at least 3 listings of lightly played or near mint on TCG Player before the shipping cost has been added in. What this does is it keeps all the cards in your deck to a maximum of $500, and that assumes that every single card in your deck meets that $5 restriction. Most of the time though, decks wind up being $200 or less, which is extremely cheap for any sort of constructed playable format. I myself have made 4 different decks that are all $150 or below, but you could also just play online if cost is an issue to you whatsoever. Of course, if cost isn't an issue, there's no rule saying that you can't play with the pretty versions of your cards. You can just buy the most expensive, elaborate ones out there, get alters done, do whatever you want. There just needs to be one printing of the card that meets that 5 below limit. Now you might be thinking that cheap cards means low power, but you'd be surprised. When you strip away some of the common, most played Commander cards, decks can actually get more powerful. Just as a note, my friend group plays with a rule 0 that Soul Ring is also banned. You also have to get more creative the more colors of mana your deck is, since the shock lands and fetch lands aren't within the $5 restriction. The cycle of enters the battlefield tapped fetch lands from Mirage, however, were reprinted in Dominaria United Commander decks and still make the mana work, but it's a little bit slower than you're used to without cards like the new tool Splunking to go alongside them. Speaking to those pre-con Commander decks for a second, the format also lends itself to being a newer player-friendly format, as a lot of the pre-con decks are within those budget restrictions of being $5 or below per card. Some groups may roll 0 the entire pre-con deck into the format because the overall cost offsets the power of the deck. Just kind of depends on the deck that you're going to be playing. Many of those cards can also be used in future decks, which keeps your costs even lower as you already may own half the cards or more that you need to build another 5 below deck. That doesn't mean the format is slow either. The format can still be pretty quick, and there are still all types of archetypes represented out there. At first, I set out to make only combo-centric decks and creature-type decks like allies, especially since I figured how cheap the allies are normally, they would be very strong. Cards like Maskwood Nexus paired with bargain bin cards like Turntimber Ranger can team up with Colostria Healer for a grand total of about $5 altogether. Woo! And then I got my ass handed to me by my friend Jessica Yoshimaru deck. Later on, the same friend also built a Crack the Thumbless list that just obliterated me. Ouch. Since then, I've toyed around with a bunch of different decks. Specifically for me, I've been going back to my mono black roots and trying to build the stacks and sacrifice decks that I always enjoyed playing. I'll put some links to lists I've built in the description below the video, just for you to try out for yourselves. But I implore you, take the 5 below challenge and design your favorite decks with a budget rule in mind and let me know how they perform. If you want to see more awesome gameplay from me, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube and follow me on Twitch at OptimusTomTV. And for all other types of content, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at OptimusTomTV. See you later.